It's good to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy. Back from Tongue Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I take my first pass at the commander in front of us on my quest out brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. That deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. As well as I'd really appreciate if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff. I'd appreciate it. But today, we're finishing up pre-con week, and I figured with the Jund land precon caring all about lands going to and from the graveyard, I figured we'd reach back and cover a popular lands commander in the Jund colors caring about lands coming to and from the graveyard in Lord Windgrace. A 5-mana Jund planeswalker that can be your commander, one of a few planeswalkers that can be your commander, comes with 5 loyalty. You can take him up to pitch a card and draw a card, but if you pitched a land card, you get to draw an additional card. You can -3 him to bring 2 lands from your graveyard back to the battlefield. Note that it doesn't say tap, so that's pretty nice. And then the big -11 for Windgrace. You can destroy up to 6 target non-land permanents and make 6 cat warriors with Forest Walk. Like a lot of what this Jund precon wants to do, we want to get our lands going to and from the graveyard, whether it's playing them back out of the graveyard, sacrificing them for value. I think Windgrace does a pretty good job at wanting to get us pitching lands to the graveyard to draw additional cards. So we want to have ways to play lands back out of our graveyard, and we're going to talk about that. But I think we also want to do that kind of sack a land, play it back out of the graveyard loop that we're seeing with these Hearthhole and these Zeril decks that we talked about this week. So we're going to do that as well and try to create a nice value engine for ourselves. But I want to say a quick thank you to the channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in seeing all of our videos just a teeny bit early for just $1 a month, consider checking it down below. I really appreciate it. Well, all right. Of course, our deck cares about lands, so we want to have landfall. I think that's kind of fairly obvious, but I think we want to try to find landfall payoffs that are just great overall. The first is another planeswalker in our list, and Nissa's really great at what she does. Every time a land comes in, you put a loyalty counter on Nissa. Her +1 can untap a land, useful if you have a land that maybe taps for more than 1 mana, but her key ability we care about is her -5. We could put a creature card with mana value less than equal to the number of lands we control from the onto the battlefield from either our hand or our graveyard with a couple counters on it. This is a really nice ability because let's say we need to pitch a creature away or a creature dies and we really want to get it back. We're in the perfect colors in black to try to get these creatures back. And we have ways to do it with spells, but Nissa adds a way to do it with her -5. Avenger of Zendikar makes a plant for each land we control when it comes in. Then whenever a land comes in, we get to grow all of our plants. This is important because ideally, on these turns where let's say we could play 2 lands, especially playing lands back out of our graveyard, we try to play a fetch land or something out of our graveyard, sack it to go get a land, play the fetch land again, sack it to go get a land. 4 land drops in a turn means that those plants could be growing every turn, or as we'll talk about on the next slide, making tokens with other creatures. The new Icetail Explorer is a card I think that's going to see a lot of love in these types of decks. We could play an additional land on each of our turns. Great to be able to play an extra one. We play lands from our graveyard, and then whenever a land comes in, we mill a card. So it fills up our graveyard, lets us play lands from our graveyard. Icetail is pretty much everything we could ask for, and it is great at it. Omnath and Scootsworm both make tokens whenever a land comes in. Scootsworm's a little bit different in that it actually makes a copy of itself when you have 6 or more lands, so it's going to start multiplying, just making a ton of Scootsworms and making them a real threat to your opponents. Springheart Nantuko is kind of an interesting card. You could bestow it as an aura onto a creature you control, and then whenever a land comes in, you can pay 1 and a green to get a copy of the thing it's attached to. Now, obviously, you want to pick something that's non-legendary so that your copy can stick around, but there's a lot of things in our deck that you can attach the Nantuko for that are just going to create a ton of value. We can also take advantage of things like Tanuk and Retreat to Hagra that are going to end up dealing damage or hurting our opponents when land comes in. Tanuk just deals a damage to each opponent whenever land comes in, and then the second time draws us a card. And then Retreat to Hagra can just have everybody lose a life and we gain a life. I mean, these are the type of abilities that are going to help us really start to close out the game and turn our landfall engines into, not only just going wide and attacking our opponents, but kind of following it up right with these damage engines as well. And then Tireless Provisioner can make either a food or a treasure when a land comes in. Again, most time we're going to pick treasure, right, for more mana and more access to do more things. Like I said, we can sacrifice our lands to get them in the graveyard to replay them, right? We don't just have to pitch them with Windgrace's ability. You have things like Elvish Reclaimer that could sack a land to go get a land of our choice and put on the battlefield tapped, a very interesting ability and could allow us to get some of our key utility lands if we want to do that. Corvold, whenever it enters or attacks, forces us to sacrifice a permanent, and then whenever we sacrifice a permanent, it grows and draws a card. So whether we sack our tokens or we sack a land, right? Corvold can grow and draws cards for it. Mazarek just grows our board whenever we sack another permanent, or anyone sacrifices another permanent. So as we're sacking these tokens and these lands to this, sacrifice land strategy, Mazarek can just grow our board for it. Scouring Swarm, whenever we sacrifice a land, kind of like Scoot Swarm, you get a 1/1 insect, but with flying this time. Or if you have 7 or more lands in your graveyard, you get a copy of the Swarm, allowing you to potentially just get more and more tokens that way. Zeril lets us play lands from our graveyard, so another way to play lands back out of our graveyard. And then whenever we sacrifice another non-token permanent, we get to spread counters equal to Zeril's power out to another creature we control, so we can start growing our creatures that way. Titania says whenever a land we control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we get to make a 5/3 elemental. So as we're hopefully trying to sacrifice these lands, to the graveyard and get them back out of the graveyard, we could be making some elementals that way. Crop Rotation lets us sacrifice land to go get any land of our choice and put it on the battlefield. Crop Rotation is going to be a lot better in a higher power bracket of this deck, where you're going to get specific big lands like Field of the Dead or Dark Depths, things like that. But I think Crop's still very good in our version of the deck, going to get key things at the right time. Hearthhold the World Seed, the new spacecraft leader of the Jund Precon. You could station him up by tapping your creatures. At 2 up, it can tap to pay 1 sack and tap it and sack a land to draw you a couple cards and play another land this turn. And at 8 up, starts dealing life to our opponents whenever we sacrifice a land. A really key ability that we want to get online so that we can take these loops and really put them to our opponents, right? And then Zurin Orb just lets us sacrifice a land to get 2 life. This is a key combo with anything that lets you play lands from your graveyard, because you could just, sack lands, play them back, and now you're triggering all your sack outlets and all your landfall outlets, hopefully multiple times. But again, we're dumping things into the graveyard, whether it's by Windgrace's pitch or by other things. We want ways to interact with our graveyard. Renin 7's a pretty fun planeswalker, so you can reveal the top 4 of your library, put all lands into your hand, and put the rest into your yard. The 0 just lets you put all lands from your hand on the battlefield tapped. -3 lets you make a tree folk that grows with each land you control. And then our -8 lets you bring all permanents from your graveyard to your hand, and you have no maximum hand size. So Renin 7 is very interesting, does a lot of things we care about in this deck, and I think is a nice value piece for us. Rem Excavator has the exact ability we want, just lets us play lands from our graveyard. So it can be always getting them back, right, and help set up those loops as we see them. 6 attacks. When it attacks, it mills 3 cards. It lets us put a land back from them into our hand. But its key ability allows us to give all non-land permanents in our graveyard retrace. So we could cast them from our graveyard. We just have to pitch a land in addition to their other costs, which is a really nice ability, right? Since we have other ways to get lands back, it means we can get those permanents back out of our graveyard. Of course, we got to have Soul of Windgrace, right? The avatar version of Windgrace. Whenever it enters or attacks, we can put a land from our graveyard on the battlefield tap. So this helps us bring the lands back. And then Soul Windgrace kind of channels the Planeswalker version and letting us pitch lands to do different things depending on what we need to do. Of course, we're in Jund colors and we're caring about lands. So, of course, the Gitrog is always an option and one we'll happily play. We play an additional land in each of our turns. Then whenever a land hits our graveyard from anywhere, we draw cards. When we're sacrificing lands, this draws us cards. If we were to mill a land, this draws us cards. Gitrog opens up a whole nother set of play lines and combo lines if you want to do that. We're not exploring it as much in this deck, but it is there if you want to do it, and Gitrog is very good at it. I didn't even know that you could do the drum sound. That's great to know. I just hit a random button on my keyboard. Life from the Loam lets us bring lands back to our hand. But the great part is it actually allows us to get access to an ability called Dredge. What Dredge does is if we would draw a card, we can mill that many cards and bring Life from the Loam back to our hand. Of course, that mill can trigger things, including Gitrog. But I think what most of the time it's going to end up doing is getting more lands in our graveyard that we could play. Or if we have too many, Life from the Loam can actually just bring lands from our graveyard back to our hand and then get itself back into the graveyard to be dredged again. Splendid Reclamation and Will of the Sultai both do something very similar, which is getting all lands from our graveyard back to the battlefield tapped. Both of these mean that the later we go in the game, the more things that fill up in our graveyard, the more we could potentially get back. Now, Will of the Sultai actually adds a nice upside, which is that if we control our commander, we can actually put a bunch of counters on a creature where X number of lands we control and give it trample. This could be used and any of our creatures to take a nice big swing and really hurt our opponents. And then Worm Harvest lets us make a worm token for each land in our graveyard, and then we get to do it again on our next upkeep. We can retrace it back. I apologize. But again, a nice ability to make a bunch of tokens, which we can either use to block with, or sacrifice fodder, or just try to grow in other manners. Conduit of Worlds is a newer version of an old artifact called Crucible of Worlds, which a lot of people will know and love in lands decks, which basically just says you can play lands from your graveyard. Conduit's a whole lot cheaper because it's colored. It's green versus being colorless. But it does provide you the option to play a non-land permanent in our graveyard once per turn, but it's the only spell we could cast that turn. The new Brood Ship is great. It's a stationed spacecraft, so as you station it, it gets up to 3. It becomes a copy of Exploration, allowing you to play additional land on each of your turns. And then, once it gets up to 8 up, we can actually play a permanent spell each turn from our graveyard by just sacrificing a land in addition to its other costs, so we can get things back and sacrifice our lands. The Brood Ship's great, and I'm happy to see the price start to stabilize. I think it's going to be a really well-played card in a lot of decks. And then Walk-in Closet from Duskmourn is pretty great. On its walk-in side, it just lets you play lands from your graveyard. But if you want to get or unlock the Cellar side, it just lets you cast spells from your graveyard this turn, and whatever a card will be put in your graveyard from anywhere this turn, and you exile it instead. So a kind of interesting ability, but it lets you play things from your graveyard, which I think is really important at the right times. It's good to remember that Windgrace is a planeswalker, right? And there's a couple auras that were released in March of the Machine Commander set that care about planeswalkers specifically. So we're going to try out both the talents. There are 3 talents we could legally play in our colors. We're just going to try the 2 of them. Liliana's talent adds the ability for Windgrace to -8 to put all creature cards from all graveyards under the battlefield under control. And then whenever a creature hits Windgrace, it would die. And then Rowan's talent gives Windgrace the ability to +1 to give a creature +2/+0 first strike and trample. But the key ability there is that whenever you activate a loyalty ability of that planeswalker, you copy it and choose new targets for the copy. So this is really fun because you can do the double draw. You could do the double bring lands back. I really like Rowan's talent, and I think it works really well. So does Liliana's talent, just getting all of our creatures back as well. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my first pass at Windgrace, and I think going into testing, I think I'd want to continue to lean into the sacrifice angle. Probably one of the best enchantments for that is Squandered Resources. A big 2-mana enchantment from Visions that just says you could sack a land to add a mana of any type that land could produce. But the point is, now you have a way at instant speed to put lands into your graveyard to either play them back or get some value, and it's really great at it. And here's Lithoforming lets you sacrifice a bunch of lands to draw a bunch of cards. You could play that many other lands this turn. I like Lithoforming, but I think Scapeshift is just a strictly better card. And it's one that I think would be probably be remiss not to mention, because I think a lot of people view it as an auto-include in these graveyard land decks. The only problem with Scapeshift is it still sits above $40. So either got to have one, right, or pull one, or what have you. But I think Scapeshift's great. It lets you sacrifice a number of lands, go get that many from your deck, and it just creates a ton of value. And then Lumra's kind of another one of these, bring all the lands from your graveyard back to the battlefield tapped, and it's a big star where star's the number of lands you control. I think this is a great option. I just kind of pulled it to try to feed into this sack replay loop, but I think Lumra's great at what it does and presents a nice threat. But let's do what we love to do the most and get into our playtests. Remember, the goal of playtests on our channel is not to find magical Christmas land. It's not just to show off our best plays, but it's to get in some gameplay scenarios and kind of understand what hands are we going to keep and what are we looking for. So here we're staring at a 5-lander, which to me can't be a downside, especially with Windgrace being 5 mana. We see Tanuke and then the talent for Windgrace. So I like this one a ton. Hopefully we can continue to start adding value to our board. Looking pretty good, right? We see the Ice Till Explorer there, so we're starting to draw pretty well. There's Hagra, but I think I'm going to get Tanuk in first. And then I could get the Explorer down, but I think it makes more sense to go with something like Hagra. We're going to play the Riveteer's Outlook, which will count for a land drop. Everybody's going to lose one, and now you're going to gain one, and then Tanuk will deal 1 damage. And the Outlook automatically sacrifices itself. I think I'm going to need a Swamp here. And this is going to trigger, again, a damage here and a life loss. So we've got this nice, right, loop starting. There you go, damage again. We could go Windgrace. I could pitch the Firelit Thicket and draw some cards, and then the next turn, right, we can always play it back out of our graveyard with the Explorer. So that's my thought. Pitch the Firelit Thicket to draw 2. Right, and then next turn, right, we could always get it back with the Ice Till Explorer. I think that's what makes Explorer so good. We at least have a blocker in Tanuk for Windgrace. I realized I missed the Tanuk trigger last turn to draw when I hit the second land drop, so we'll do it now because it's not a May, just to make sure that we're square up on that one. All right, so here on turn 6, I really want to get Ice Till in. Let's see. I'll play Firelit Thicket from my graveyard. Trigger here, trigger that to mill a card. Right? And then I can get an additional land this turn, and I think I want to do that, right? Lands there, I mill a card. Then my thought is play the Dryad. The Dryad lets me play an additional card. I'll play the Swamp from my graveyard because then I can still pitch this Swamp to Windgrace to draw cards if we want to. So there we go. That's 2 force, effectively 6 damage done, right? That Swamp had me mill a card. I milled the Evolving Wells. But the really nice thing now is that all my lands have every land type, so I don't have to worry about what colors I have. I'm always going to have enough mana. I'll tick up Windgrace again, pitch, draw 2, right? And then I'll end up drawing from Tanuk, right, when that second land came in. Now, right, Windgrace is working his way up to his ultimate. We can always use him to get these lands back if we want to, but we kind of really don't need to, right? Because Ice Till's letting us play exactly whatever land we want to out of our graveyard. And we're just going to continue to get value. And now as we come into our next turn, we're allowed to play 3 lands this turn, 1 for regular, 1 from Ice Till, 1 from Dryad. So we have a choice. Do we want to play them from our graveyard? Remember, every time we play Riveteer's Outlook, we're effectively getting an extra landfall trigger, right? Because the Outlook comes in, it sacrifices itself, goes and gets that basic, and then that basic triggers that. That could be an interesting loop for us. I hope I didn't do that wrong with the Dryad, because that land does come in tapped. Either way, I don't think it's going to matter all that much. We're working our way towards a big Torment of Hailfire ending if we want to, forcing a lot of bad sacrifices on our opponents. But I think it makes sense to start with the Outlook. Got a mill card off the Explorer, Tanuk, and right, Hagra deal the damage. This sacrifices itself. And I'll make sure I put this off to the side. Just remember that it's tapped. I almost feel like maybe we want Zerlin right first. It lets us play lands from our graveyard again, but maybe it would make more sense to make sure that we're getting real value off that. Play the Outlook again. Mill off the Explorer. Tanuk draws me a card. And then, right, damage from the Hagra again. Sack it. That's actually going to trigger Zeril to go off, right? Giving 2 counters to something. We'll give it to the Ice Till Explorer. And then I still have a couple mana left I can use. I thought was maybe something like Horizon Explorer. Would have been nice to play it before we started with our lands coming in untapped. But, no worries there. We can always just hold up, some removal and something like Assassin's Trophy. But I think I'd probably just run the same loop again. Play the Outlook. Mill a card with Ice Till Explorer. And then it automatically sacrifices itself. Another land drop trigger there. We'll put the counters on Tanuk. And go and get a land, right? So the whole point that we're showing off here is this is a reusable loop, right? That we hopefully can continue using to go get all the basics in our deck, which eventually we will run out of basics, and then this loop isn't useful. But if you think about it, we got what, 6 or 7, 6 life loss off of Hagra, 6 life loss off Tanuk just this turn. And now we're setting ourselves up for a huge Hailfire next turn. I think we just use Windgrace to draw and then pitch the mountain. Go to, go to end step, and we can just um, load up our graveyard. I think I still would just hold up the removal mana. And now on our turn, we have enough for Windgrace to ultimate if we want to. I've got the big Torment of Hailfire for 9 or 10 at this point, which is going to be brutal for our opponents to deal with. And I just think we're in great shape here, stopping right there where we should be hopefully in the lead. The downside of that game would be somebody going after Tanuk or Iso Explorer with removal. But again, that's the point of ideally that's the point of having something like Zeril as well, is so then you have the ability to play lands from your graveyard multiple times. Here we're looking at a 4-lander with Exploration. There's the Reminap to play out of the graveyard, and then Mazarek. So Mazarek's going to look really nice up against things like Reminap, Excavator, let us play from our graveyard. I'm going to crack this fetch land without having anything down to profit from it, because we want to help to fix our colors a little bit. I thought is here now I can play the Exploration. Kind of want to just do that and get the Ramanap down. We're still one mana off of Mazarek, but we can get 2 lands in this turn. I'd love Mazarek to be there to do it, because this comes in tapped. I can get both of these in, but I think they're both just going to end up leading me to tapped mana, right? Have Depths come in as a copy of the Bloodstained Mire, and I guess we can just... We could Kadama's Reach, right? This is going to come in tapped. I play this untapped. So now we've got some great mana. We set up the Sacrifice for next turn for Mazarek. I kind of like the look of that. As we come into our next turn, we get Mazarek in. Remember that Echoing Deeps is a copy of Bloodstained Mire. So we sack it. Mazarek puts a counter on all of our creatures. We go get one of our duels. And then we have enough mana to get Windgrace in. I'll get him in. Then my thought is play the Riveteer's Outlook. It automatically sacrifices itself to its ability, giving each of them a counter. Go and get another basic. And then I think I'll just pitch Verdant Catacombs to Windgrace, because I can play it back out of my graveyard with the Excavator. Just try to draw in, and we can play it back out of our graveyard with the Conduit World. So great. Remember that the Depths comes in as a copy of any land in our graveyard. So it does come in tap, so we can't play it and use it right away. But it could be a way to store up, an interesting land for later. Mazarek in... Excavator they can attack this turn, right? And they got that nice growth off of Mazarek's ability. So then coming into our turn, remember, we ideally kind of want to just play the lands out of our graveyard, right? Because they're going to sacrifice themselves, causing everything to grow, right? So I kind of would rather focus on playing the things out of my graveyard. I think I'll set up the Conduit and the Arcane Signet just in case. And then I think I'm just going to Riveteers twice. Right, because I can play lands twice with Exploration. So I'm just going to Riveteers twice. That'll lead to 2 more counters from these guys. And we'll just go get a couple more lands. No landfall triggers, unfortunately, right, to take advantage of. But I think that's okay. I think that's all right, because truthfully, we're still setting up a ton of value, right, in this scenario, even though we're not getting the landfall triggers off them. We're growing the land base to just get more and more mana on the next turn. I think I'm going to pitch the Thespian Stage to draw 2, right, because we have more than enough lands in our graveyard, that we can always get back with his abilities. And we saw Lotus Field, a land that can sack lands when it comes in, and then another land. So again, we can continue drawing with Windgrace. We would have loved to have seen more landfall payoffs, but I think we got to really see this sacrifice land graveyard thing work. And now Windgrace can continue to turn them into card draw. We just need, I think, to find a way some more card draw, and I think we're still just in good shape. Mazark's growing the board. I mean, it's probably a good. It's probably truthfully, it's probably a lightning rod for removal in this scenario. But remember, we can always cast it back with the conduit, right, and then keep on our game plan. Let's go into playtest number 3 here. Keeping a 3-lander, there's Field of the Dead, or 4-lander. Pretty key land whenever a land comes in. If we have 7 or more lands with different names, we make a zombie token. Mending's an interesting one. You mill 2 and put a creature from your graveyard into your hand, and then the last one brings all your lands from your graveyard back to the battlefield, then shuffles your graveyard into your library. So it can really save your graveyard. We see Harrow and the Talon. Well, I think I'm just willing to put the Savage lands in turn 1. There's the Brood Ship, so we can get the Brood Ship started. I think I'll just put in the Field of the Dead. I was trying to wait as long as I can to start playing the fetch lands, but I think... So do I need to just do it now? It doesn't make any sense. If I Harrow, I can Harrow the... I could Harrow, like, the Forest away for... Mountain Swamp? I was trying to see if I can get my way into Windgrace. So there we go. There's turn 5 for Windgrace. Tick them up. Take away a fetch land to draw 2. I was trying to see if I can get my way into another creature, right, to get the Brood Ship online. And there we go. Now Tanuk can get the Brood Ship online. So I'd play it. Play the fetch. Crack the fetch. And let's go get... there's Cinderglade. We'll get something like Smoldering Marsh. That's going to draw me a card off Tanuk. And there's some damage. I've still got... I don't have enough to get Brood Ship online to get a second land play, but we can at least try. Tick this down. The nice thing about Echoing Depths, actually, is it can come in as a copy in Outlook, and it automatically sacrifices itself, right? So we do that to set up that. Get the Soul Ring in, and just live to fight another day. I was going to say, ideally, we'd love to see some more creatures. There's one in Ice-Till Explorers. That's not too bad. Now at least we have another land play. And I guess since Ice-Till isn't going to do anything, we might as well use it to station the Brood Ships. Now the Brood Ship's online. We can play 3 lands this turn. So my thought is Echoing comes in as a copy of the Riveteer's Outlook, which Ice-Till mills me a card. It auto-sacrifices right to Riveteer's ability, which mills me a card. Then, like I said, I can play the Depths twice more back out of my graveyard, right? Sorry, draw off of Tanuk. We could play it again back out of our graveyard. Remember, it keeps coming in as a copy of Riveteer's Outlook, automatically sacrifices itself, and does its job. That could get us 2 more basics. This Forest coming in would get me a zombie, right? If I do that again, each of those lands would get me a zombie, right? But now might not be a bad time to play something like Foothills from my hand. That gets me a zombie. Do we have any other dual type lands? Go get the Ziatoras. That gets me a zombie. Another damage from Tanuk. And then might as well use the zombies to get exploration up. And then we'll do one more loop of the... that'll mill me 2 with the Explorer. I kind of missed that trigger. Do another loop with the Echoing Depths, so when it comes in, I mill 1, and then go out of my library, go get another basic. Another 2 zombies, mill a card with... Ice-Till to its Explorer, another damage there. And now, right, this is great from the Brood Ship, because now as we're milling these permanents, we have ways to get them back if we want to get something like the Orb back. Otherwise, I think we're just in good shape. Have Windgrace pitch the Forest here, try to get some draw into something else. There's 6, can help us cast things back out. Exploration for more land drops. Now, ideally, I think all we need is something like Hagra to, like, really turn this, against our opponents. We could get the Mending down next turn and try to stop preventing ourselves from being milled out, right? If we want to do that. And I think otherwise, I just think we're in good shape. I think you can kind of see the loop that we're looking to create. But I'd love to know, what do you think of Windgrace down in the comment section below? Again, very much up this Hearth Hall Zero line that the Precon does. I just wanted to show a more classic example and show you what is accessible through it. But I'd love to know what you think of Windgrace, and I will catch you in the next one.